Welcome. My name is Otemmen. I'm reporting for Prima Magazine live from the eScience Conference here in the Amsterdam arena. And we're talking here with Fernando Perez, who this morning gave a very nice presentation about data and tools and about how to handle them. So welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm originally a physicist by training, but I've spent most of my career building computational tools. After my PhD, I worked in applied mathematics, then in neuroscience, and in the last few years, I've been part of a team building an institute for data science at UC Berkeley, where I have an appointment, and I recently moved to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where I'm now part of the data science and technology department, and that's where I conduct my research. For the last 15 years or so, a lot of my work has been around building open source tools for scientific computing and data science, mostly in the Python programming language. But not only that, I started building IPython when I was a graduate student about 15 years ago, and over time became very involved with kind of the entire scientific Python ecosystem, which is a collection of interoperable tools that each of which targets a different type of problem, whether it's numerical processing or algorithms or statistical computing or data visualization, etc. And that has been built by a large collaboration of people. IPython, which started, as I mentioned, about 15 years ago, is now a large project that is also built collaboratively, not just by me, but by many other people. We have a big team, and it has evolved into something which is now called Project Jupyter, which is really the extension of the original ideas in IPython, but now to multiple programming languages. It's a project that now basically is where I spend most of my research time, is in building the Jupyter platform together with the rest of the team and continuing to push that as an environment for data science.
You started so 50 years ago with IPython, and at that time Python was not brand new but relatively new, and actually it was invented here in Amsterdam.
Yes, I
visited the place yesterday.
I had the opportunity to visit yesterday the CWI in the Science Park at the University of Amsterdam, where Guido van Rossum originally was working when he created the language, and we actually had lunch in the cafeteria in that building, and so it was very nice for me to come here to this conference and have a chance to sort of see the birthplace of Python. The language was not originally designed as a scientific programming language. It was built as a general purpose language, but it turned out to be really well adapted to the needs of scientists. It is high level enough that it's easy to read and write. It can be used interactively, which is very useful for exploring data and iterating on algorithmic questions and computational questions rather than only building software. So it's very well suited to the kinds of workflows that scientists need. And it also has a very easy interfacing with high performance, low level libraries. And so that combination of being high level enough and flexible enough and easy enough for scientists to use, but still allowing you to get performance, made it an ideal combination. And many scientists from multiple disciplines adopted it, and so even though 15 years ago it might have been a few people trying this out, over time it has become a major force in the scientific computing world, and now we see projects. We just saw a presentation from one of the technical leads at the LSST, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope project, which is one of astronomy's biggest projects, and he was explaining how their entire software pipeline is based on Python. So this is a big victory, I guess, for this originally Dutch creation, it has had a huge impact in scientific research and in education as well, because these same tools are also used for teaching.
Let's say 15 years ago, working with data or making that a kind of profession was also relatively new. I mean, most scientists at that time did collect their own data and did their own Fortran programming, and they didn't want to have people making tools for them.
Yes, that was a lot. There are a few areas, there were a few fields that had kind of a bigger tradition of building computational tools, typically physics and numerical computing and the big solvers in partial differential equations, but those were kind of a few selected fields. And even in those fields, the job of building these tools was not really very much rewarded. And in fact, for many of us who really got absorbed into this kind of work, we were told multiple times to not do this because it would be scientific career suicide. And indeed, many people were actually punished professionally by doing that. But I think gradually there's a greater recognition in the scientific community at large that this is actually a necessary part of research, and that we have to recognize, we have to value, we have to reward, we have to support, we have to fund this kind of work, because we're never going to be able to tackle the next generation of scientific questions if we don't have the tool infrastructure to do it. And that tool infrastructure isn't going to get built simply on people's spare time.
This event here is organized by the eScience Center, and actually that's a kind of, it's not really new, but it's a way of organizing multidisciplinary scientists with people who know how to program and how to analyze data, and tool specialists and stuff like that. And I think you see that more and more here in Europe. I think we have already about 25 or maybe even more of this eScience Center in each country. And how is that in the US?
So in the US, there's also a movement towards building similar kinds of institutions. I'm actually part of a collaboration. I'm part of the team at UC Berkeley that started the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, and that was actually a collaborative project between UC Berkeley, the University of Washington, and NYU, where there are 3 institutes of this type, obviously each with its own peculiarities because the institutions are different, but they were all collectively funded by 2 foundations, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, that gave these 3 universities a common grant to build institutes of this kind within US universities to precisely explore these same questions of the combination of tool development, domain research questions, methodological development, integration within the university environment, career paths, and that sort of complex combination that doesn't fit easily into the existing structure of universities and departments and the existing career paths that at least the US academia supports. We were tasked basically with building entities that could push the limits of those questions. I had really good discussions yesterday with the team at the eScience Center here, and I learned a lot, and I took a lot of notes on the approaches that they are taking and how they are building their collaborations to see what lessons we can bring back to the US.
Yeah, because it's here in Europe, but also between Europe and the United States and Japan. I think there are good collaborations on the eScience side, you could say. Is that true, or is it something which I just mentioned?
No, I think there are collaborations, but I think there's still a lot that we can learn. There's especially differences in how the funding structure is constructed in Europe and in the US, and that actually has an impact. And so I think there's still a lot of opportunity for better integration in this regard, because these are spaces that are very new, and also here, and we're sort of breaking new ground. I would say, sort of cutting transverse to the grain of the institutions. Right, we're kind of doing things that are a little bit orthogonal to the way traditionally the system has operated. So I think there's still plenty of opportunity for learning lessons across the systems.
Yeah, because then also funding agencies have to adapt to new ways of funding and finding ways to make that important. Here, for instance, you have these.
Now, it's probably worth mentioning, though, that in the space of the open source tool development, that has traditionally been a very highly collaborative space. And for example, in the part of that world that I know best, which is the scientific Python world, if you look at all of the major projects in scientific Python, they all have large amounts of contributions from both European and teams in the US, and obviously in other parts of the world. But there's a lot of activity from both, and those teams work very much hand in hand in a highly collaborative manner.
So what are let's say, the new developments that you see, or which are the important things that are currently happening there?
There's a lot.
Yeah,
I would say there is a lot. I think the scientific Python community continues to mature and grow and tackle more complex problems. There's been a great development, I would say, probably in the last 5 years that makes me very happy, which is that the amount of work that is being done is not only concentrated on what I would call the core tools, traditionally the core numerical and algorithms and visualization tools. Those still continue to be developed, but what has been very good to see is in the last few years a big explosion now of really high quality libraries in domain areas. So you see good libraries developed to do analysis of data in very specific problems in geophysics, in specific problems in astronomy, in radio astronomy, in solar physics, right, in social sciences. And so the fact that is, I think, a sign of the health of an ecosystem, that the basic layer is already in good shape. And so people can say, well, I don't need to go build that foundation, that's already being taken care of. And now communities can develop tools in the specific areas and problems that matter to them. And all of those are still reusing the base foundation. And so I think that's a sign of a healthy and growing ecosystem. The other thing that I think is worth signaling is, which is not in Python, is the growing development of the Julia programming language, which is a really interesting, modern, high-level language, but developed with a lot of new ideas and kind of new research from the computer science perspective, but bringing also the lessons of systems like Python sort of with a fresh perspective. And I'm very excited to see what is coming out of that community. It's growing in a very healthy way.
Julia language, it's a new language.
It's a brand new language that is still, they just this week released the 0.5 version, and it's a language that is primarily aimed or originally focused on numerical computing, but it's a very general purpose language that is basically trying to bring sort of the best lessons of languages like Python together with very modern infrastructure from the compiler perspective and the type theory perspective to allow you to express high-level ideas and out of the box get very high performance. So while in Python you sometimes do hit performance bottlenecks where you have to resort to then switching to C or C++ or Fortran, and the transition between those two is possible, but is not completely smooth. Julia tries to give the scientist all the performance you need while still operating at in a very high level. And in order to do that, they had to basically rethink the type system, rethink the approach that it uses is to have a compiler always available at runtime, so that even though it's a dynamic language, it uses LLVM at runtime to constantly emit machine code with a very sophisticated type inference machinery and type annotation machinery as well. And so it tries to sort of give us the best of both worlds, the expressive power and the high-level exploratory feel of tools like Python, while having the performance profile of a language like C. And it was born out of a research project at MIT, led by Alan Edelman and the mathematics department at MIT. And I think there's really a lot of interesting ideas coming out of it.
Isn't it also one of the languages I think that are more developed within which could be used or should be used for exascale computing?
I think it's a little bit early to call that. I think the problems in exascale computing are really complex, and Julia has been. They've put a lot of thought into how it will scale and how parallelism will work in Julia. So at least they're thinking in that direction. I would say that it's still a bit early to say what. Maybe it will.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot from the work here in the Netherlands in this space. So it's been a pleasure, and there's already opportunities for collaborations and contacts. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. For Premier Magazine, this was Artem reporting.